Welcome back, everyone. We're talking right now with John Michitson, six-term city councilor, running for an additional term on the city council. Welcome, John.
Hi, Frank. It's always good to be here.
You know, the fact is, you've got a long history with the city council and city government, and how things have changed from the beginning of your tenure on the council to how things happen to be right now. What do you think is the biggest change that you have seen in the city of Haverhill since that time?
Well, I think the biggest change that we need, and maybe it's starting.
What have you seen before you tell us what we need? You know, what's the biggest change since the time you started in the council to time now? That's 6 terms, so that's 12 years.
I think that guys like former city councilors like George Deakian.
Yeah.
I used to think he was, very difficult sometimes to work with, but I miss him. And I'll tell you why. Because he used to look at every detail, and he would fight you tooth and nail. And by the time you were done with that discussion, the right thing happened for the city of Haverhill.
So
and I think
challenges are good then.
That passion isn't there like it used to be. It's a little more orderly.
It's interesting.
And I miss that.
You know, interesting. You were going to say things that the city needs to do. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that starts with bringing economic development up on the priority ladder. Mm-hmm. The whole world is thinking about it. The United States of America right now is losing its share of the global economy. That's going to have a huge impact on us going forward. Where are you going to be working? Where are your kids going to be working?
Has there been an inverse? How do you deal with the inverse that in the state of Massachusetts, in some ways, some businesses or populations have been dissipated in some areas of Massachusetts, but Haverhill seems to be growing, and that goes to the fact of it being 36 square miles and lower living costs here and for business startups as well, which you've been involved in too, no?
Yes, I think that the diversity that Haverhill has. The fact that a lot of people that have, let's say, a better financial picture have moved into the outskirts over the last 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. I think that has helped to balance the diversity in the city, which has been really good for it.
But as far as moving to the outskirts?
The fact that new people have come into the city.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That have bought the larger homes
yeah.
On the outskirts. I think that has actually helped raise the average, which I think helps everybody in the city. But as far as startups go, that's really an area that I've been working on. And the reason is that if you get the startup companies to your city, then you get the thought leaders here. And then the traditional larger businesses follow. And that's exactly what they're doing in Boston in their innovation district. Mass Challenge started its startup competition there probably 3 or 4 years ago. And there are a lot of vacant buildings in that section of town. Since they've been there, a lot of startups moved in because it was cheaper space, and now they don't have the cheaper space. But the bigger companies are moving there because they want to be next to where all the ideas are so that they can build innovation partnerships that they can't really do internally with their bureaucracy. Bigger companies have a bureaucracy. It's that simple. So Haverhill basically needs to fight for jobs for the future. And
how do they do that? With space, availability of space, and have you been able to work with Mr. Pillsbury, the economic development director, and how is
yes.
that? How have those dynamics worked?
So I've worked with Bill Pillsbury and the mayor on a couple of initiatives that I've been leading. One was to have a startup competition in Haverhill, and that required myself and several other community-minded Haverhill business people to make frequent trips into Boston and Cambridge, and let the startups coming out of those colleges know that Haverhill's a place where they can start up, they can get partnerships right off the bat, and the cost for space is less in Haverhill. So we have a really good pitch to give the startups. We just have to work at it. And running a startup contest is a lot of work. The thing that we did in parallel with that, Lisa Fitzpatrick said, I've got an idea. Let's marry the contest with developing an incubator down at the Burgess Business Center. for small companies, for startup companies. And in 2 years, marketing it, what we're calling innovation-based marketing, she's been able to get 32 startup and small companies to move in, occupying over 30,000 square feet. So the idea now is move that out to the business parks. Take that successful model and move it out to the business parks. And I personally believe that there's capacity in those business parks and future ones that we may have in Haverhill to ramp up recurring revenue from the commercial tax base by $3 million a year by 2020.
Can you tell me the diversity of these types of businesses and how sustainable they may be? I know if you're talking about in the past 2 years when this initiative started 2 years ago, and typically the threshold for a startup tends to be the third year. You know, and how successful have these businesses been, or has there been an attrition ratio? Because where some, let's say of 30 businesses that go in, if 10% of them fall out, well, that's still 27, but there will be other businesses that sort of take their place. Has that been a momentum that's been built up that keeps on going?
That's a very good question. In fact, in preparation for this event today, I had a chat with Lisa to see how things have been going the past couple of months. And she's been holding steady at that 32 number, which means some have been leaving and some new ones have been coming in. And I think that's the way that it works. And that's why you need a large influx of these startups, because only a certain percentage of them are actually going to make it.
Alternately, we've just about, with maybe less than a minute and a half left to go, and we're taking a look at any different perspective on the City Council. Briefly, can you take a look back in the past couple of years to see, are there any things that should have been done that went in a different direction that you'd like to see changed, or some things that should have been done that haven't been that you'd like to see promoted, other than the business initiatives?
I would still like to see more concentration on developing a sound maintenance plan for our buildings and following through, making sure that we have enough money to manage our buildings. And the reason is that what's happening, one at a time, we're ending up either replacing the building or renovating it entirely. And that's $1 million a year for 20 years.
It's kicking the can down the road unless you do something about it.
It's kicking the can down the road. And if we had fixed the roof for $100,000 or $200,000, then the rain wouldn't have, hurt the foundation, and we wouldn't be in a position where we have to spend $1 million a year for 20 years to fund these big projects.
Pay now
but
or
we do.
Pay later.
But we do.
Yeah, I know that was an initiative, if I recall, that former councilor Mike Bresnahan was a hallmark of his campaign as well.
Yes, and I do have one other key point here is that Mr. Scully has really turned things around as far as the maintenance at the school buildings. He's taken it upon himself. He is the maintenance director for the Haverhill School buildings, and he's working hard to try to build that up.
John Michitson, thanks very much for being here. We're on time. We appreciate you being here. And we wish you the best of luck.
And I appreciate it, Frank.
We'll be back in just a moment.